On this episode of China Unscripted, China's communist regime is trying to silence Hong Kong, but an 18-year-old activist is giving them, and you, a voice. Welcome to China Unscripted. I'm Chris Chappell.
And I'm Matt Ganesha.
And I'm sorry to say we don't have Shelley with us today. Why is that, Matt?
Well, apparently Shelley has been up all night writing an America Uncovered episode about the whole GameStop thing and Reddit and how, it's I'm sure you already know about this. And actually that episode is already published by now if you're watching this. So, yeah. So unfortunately, Shelley couldn't make it. So.
But that's okay. We have a very exciting interview today. Joining us today is Joyce Ho, founder and director of Project Black Mask. Joyce, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Definitely. So why don't you tell us a bit about Project Black Mask? It's not a COVID thing, right?
No. So really Project Black Mask, well, I would say it might be a little bit of a COVID thing because the idea came about while I was quarantined at home during COVID.
Oh.
So for me, I was on the streets pretty much at least once or twice a month at protests in New York for Hong Kong prior to COVID. So once COVID hit, obviously we had a really big problem with a lot of people were feeling hopeless because all of these Hong Kongers are overseas. So seeing something like what's happening in Hong Kong happen and not being able to be there physically and fight alongside those that you feel such a strong connection with is really difficult. But then having the quarantine and not even being able to go out onto the streets of New York or Boston or wherever you are in the US was an added difficulty. So I wanted to figure out some sort of way that Hong Kongers and people all around the world could show their support for Hong Kong and continue demonstrating the fact that there's no stop in what we're doing just because of a global pandemic. We have to continue fighting, and people won't just be blind to what's happening in Hong Kong because there is a pandemic, because as a lot of us do know, China has taken the opportunity of the world's attention being diverted to coronavirus to take advantage of Hong Kong. So Project Black Mask really started as a video project where I would collect a lot of videos from people all around the world saying, I'm from blank and I stand with Hong Kong. And I wanted to first show Hong Kongers that the world stood with them, but I also wanted to do something a little more, I would say, practical in terms of making change for Hong Kong. And so I sent a lot of these videos to Congress people, and I wanted to make sure that the American citizens could show their voices to our representative and tell them that we do care and that you guys need to vote on behalf of a pro-democracy side for Hong Kong. And so I think that was, a lot of these Congress people were very, very appreciative of the fact that I could show them that, Americans care and we do want the United States to be a part of this, and we want to be on the side of pro-democracy and not on the side of the CCP. So that was, the early time for Project Black Mask. And then as we grew a little bit bigger, I really came up with this idea that I wanted to become an outlet where people who are oppressed by the CCP could get their information, could spread their stories to the free world. So I'm working on a part of Project Black Mask where we can try to get young people around my age. I'm 18 years old. So getting young people to become a part of Project Black Mask to the point where they can talk about their ethnic groups. So maybe I can find a teenager who is a Uyghur who's very, very serious about fighting for the human rights in Xinjiang for the Uyghur population, or a Tibetan. And so maybe they can do the same thing that I'm doing for the same cause, and we can come together. And as we all know, being together is way more, it is a lot stronger than just being apart, because China is huge and China has so much power. And if, we're split up, we can't do anything. But if we come together, we can do a lot more.
Yeah, I saw that fairly recently you co-wrote an op-ed for Teen Vogue with a Uyghur activist and a Tibetan activist. So you really do seem to be finding opportunities to work together with these various different persecuted groups in China.
Yes. So for me, I think when I first started being a part of this community in terms of groups that are oppressed by the CCP, everybody was very uninformed about the other groups.
Hmm.
I didn't know anything about the Tibetans or the Uyghurs. And then you start reading up on it and you realize that your fight is really one and the same. We're still fighting against the same enemy. Maybe there are little differences in the way that they're treating us. But at the end of the day, we do want to show CCP that we will oppose their actions because they violate human rights, because they violate simple democracy and autonomy and freedom in general. And so that's why I really want to show the world and show all of these groups that we can work together, because our path is really one path, and we're fighting for the same thing, and we're fighting against the same thing as well.
And a lot of the tactics the CCP uses against all these various groups are very similar. A lot of the cultural genocide that's happened to the Tibetans happened to the Uyghurs, and in many ways has happened to the people of Hong Kong.
Absolutely, yeah.
So Project Black Mask began around the time of the beginning of the quarantine, so that was probably around March of last year. So still before the national security law was implemented in, June of that year?
It was July 1st, 2020, yeah. So
Yeah.
it was right after.
Mm-hmm. In 2019, we saw the massive protest movement. We saw a lot of young people really getting involved in standing up to the Chinese Communist Party. How did the coronavirus sort of affect how young people were carried on the protest movement?
Well, I mean, obviously there's going to be a decline in people coming out because Hong Kongers after SARS, they were really able to understand a viral pandemic kind of situation, just like what we're going through right now. So they understand how to protect themselves. And I know that a lot of Hong Kongers, even since SARS, have had masks. They always carry hand sanitizer, like that kind of thing that I would say Americans were not prepared for. Hong Kongers were always prepared for. All of these youngsters, they grew up in a society where they knew that, if the next pandemic comes along, we have to be prepared. So all of them, I would say, knew that the protests would have to die down a little bit. And we've definitely seen that. We haven't seen as many massive protests on the street. But, I think that it's also a result of the Chinese government cracking down a little bit more. In March, when the pandemic came down, even though it was prior to the national security law, we saw a lot of the Chinese government's threats coming down. And even though the extradition bill was repealed, it didn't mean anything on behalf of the Chinese government, I would say. Like, yeah, that was them stepping back a little bit because they realized that the extradition bill was not something that was feasible, but they definitely knew that they would have to continue kind of slowly taking control of Hong Kong. And I think that these Hong Kongers knew. So a lot of them were getting arrested even in those months between March and July.
Mm-hmm.
So the protests died down a lot because people were scared, I would say, and for a good reason, of course. You don't want to be under any sort of incarceration by the Chinese government or even the Hong Kong government at this point.
Yeah.
So in March, I just think, you didn't see any more protests with like 2 million, 3 million people anymore. You saw very small spurts of youngsters coming out and saying, we're going to block these roads. We're going to protest on this street and run away as soon as possible. I think there were very local efforts to do things, but no more large scale, because the youngsters, I would say, understood that they didn't want to endanger any more lives than they had to.
And I think it's ironic, during the protest movement in 2019, the Hong Kong protesters often wore face masks, so police couldn't identify them. And then there was this whole big thing about the anti-mask law. You're not allowed to wear masks. And then COVID. And then, actually, please wear your masks all the time. Which is too bad. It would have been a perfect opportunity to come out on the streets and protest. And they wouldn't have known who you are.
Yeah.
But so let's talk about the national security law, because that definitely changed things. It basically made criticism of the CCP impossible in Hong Kong. And, this was a protest movement that was calling them Chi-Nazis.
Yeah.
So how has this forced the protest movement to evolve?
Well, so the national security law has not only affected Hong Kongers in Hong Kong, but also Hong Kongers like me who are overseas. The national security law is it's very, very vague. They can arrest you based off of anything, in essence. We've seen people being questioned because they're wearing black, or maybe even arrested because they're wearing black. That kind of idea. They can arrest you over anything. They can arrest you because, I heard from a neighbor that you are protesting against China. That kind of idea. It's really like a big brother situation for me. I'm looking at it, and everybody's turning on each other, and it's really ridiculous. And for the national security law to be enacted, it really meant that a lot of people stopped protesting because there was a genuine fear. Now there's a law that states that if you ever show any signs of not oppression, opposition towards the CCP, you could be arrested and you will go back to China, even if, it's not publicly known that you're in China. We all know that if you are a figure that is strong enough to show opposition to China, you will be sent back there, and who knows what's going to happen to you. The national security law put a lot of fear in a lot of people's minds and hearts. And even for me, I had to contact a lot of people, my friends in Hong Kong who might be protesting, and tell them, please stay safe. It's really crazy. Even I have to stay safe. Sometimes my parents don't feel comfortable with me walking on the streets in New York because there are a lot of people who have really shown a lot of open criticism towards our movement, even in New York. And, you never know who's going to call the national security hotline and say, I know this person, and, they've been here on these days, and we want you to arrest them. And this can happen in both the US and Hong Kong, and in Hong Kong. You never know how far the CCP reach really goes. And so the national security laws really put a damper on everything that's happening, but people aren't slowing down with it. And we're actually seeing that it's caused a lot of activists in Hong Kong, of the really huge activists, to, flee to foreign countries like United States, to England, to different places where they can, express their freedoms well and can show the world what they're really going up against.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you had any plans to go back to Hong Kong, but you feel like even in the U.S. you're in danger.
Yeah, I absolutely do. I've been followed sometimes. You never know who's like there. I've been yelled at on the streets whenever even after my protesting. Like when you're in a big group, a lot of these pro CCP supporters, they won't yell at you because they're afraid. But like, being alone on the street, they might recognize you. Since I wore a mask when I was protesting, and now I'm wearing a mask all the time. So they recognize you. They might recognize your eyes, and then they'll yell at you and stuff like that. And so it's gotten to the point where I absolutely know that I cannot go to Hong Kong. Obviously can't go to China. But being in the US is also a danger as well. And I know that all my activist friends are also taking those precautions because they know that the Chinese Communist Party is dangerous, and that they have a lot of supporters, and their supporters don't just end in China. They're all over the world.
Well, so these Hong Kong activists must be really excited that you have created something like Project Black Mask, where I assume they can, as well as anyone around the world, can still make their voices heard in support of Hong Kong.
Yeah, a lot of people are still, I've noticed that a lot of people have kind of slowed down on trying to send me videos, but I do get a lot of really supportive messages from people who are saying, I am afraid, and I have to respect them for that, because I understand, especially coming from a family who really, like my parents, they actually left Hong Kong prior to 1997 because their families understood the danger of the CCP. So coming from a family that really taught me how dangerous this kind of government can be, I understand why people are so afraid of them, and I have to respect it. And I think that it's noble for them to even talk to me and tell me that I support you. I just don't want to make it public. Like, I really appreciate those kinds of messages.
And I mean, considering the risks, like even you are facing, like, you said you're 18. What makes you want to do this versus anything else an 18-year-old in New York can be doing?
Yeah. So, I mean, my story started in the summer of 2019 when the extradition bills protests first happened. And for me, when I first sat down and I told my parents, look, I want to go to protests. I want to stand on the right side of history. They said, you even posting something, one post, could get you in trouble with the Chinese government. That could be it for you. You can't go back to Hong Kong anymore. You're going to be in danger for probably a really long time. And I said to them, look, I'm seeing all of these 18, back then I was like 17, 16. I told them I'm a 16-year-old, and I see all of these kids that are my age or similar to my age, and they're fighting with their lives on the streets of Hong Kong. And I was just lucky enough to be in the US. I was just lucky enough to have parents who had the ability to come to the United States, to enjoy the freedoms that we have here. But there are millions of teenagers my age that don't have that freedom in Hong Kong right now, and I feel at least a small responsibility to use what I have been given to give them a voice, because in Hong Kong now they really don't have a voice. And for me, I think that my platform has given them a space to educate the American population on what's happening in Hong Kong. For me, it came down to first responsibility, but also just like a longing to be to help Hong Kong in any way possible. I felt like, I always went back to Hong Kong over the summers, and I haven't been back in a while now, but I always have felt a connection to Hong Kong, and I feel that it's so, so unfortunate that democracy can be taken away like that. And growing up in the United States, I never imagined that democracy was so freely, given and then taken away from people.
It's fragile.
And yeah, exactly. So in this past year, you've seen how easy it is for democracy to be just revoked from so many people. It's incredible to me that this can even happen. But that's why I really wanted to be a part of this. And even though it's a danger for me for probably the rest of my life, as an 18-year-old, I think that my voice will be the voice of the future. And I tell this to, a lot of people, that I am the future of this world. My generation is the future of this world. And if we don't stand up to do something, then nobody else will.
Well, my generation's working pretty hard to make sure that your generation won't have a future. So
I was just thinking, of all the decisions that I made, at 18 that were going to affect me for the rest of my life, like, I wish the decisions I made were like standing up for human rights, because, as these things go, like, you could probably make worse choices.
Well, I imagine a lot of like the people you go to school with are probably really inspired by your story.
I hope so. I just graduated high school last year, so I had a group of very, very close friends who were always, there to support me. We had wear black shirt day in support of Hong Kong, and they all showed up in black shirts, and I'm so appreciative of, even though a lot of them came from families that are very pro CCP. But as I was saying, if you grow up in the US, you probably have a very different point of view when it comes to freedom and democracy. So for them, they knew, we want to support you. And in high school, for me, it was just, I never had a lot of opposition from people, which I'm so thankful for. And everybody let me say whatever I wanted to say, because I think, at the end of the day, a lot of people know that, what I'm saying is right, even if, there might be some ways that the Hong Kong protesters are going about it wrong. A lot of people disagree on the violence and stuff like that, but we're fighting for the right thing. And a lot of people really, really understood that sentiment, and my friends supported me and even wanted to come to my rallies and stuff like that. So I really appreciate that. But in college, I've had a little bit of difficulty for obvious reasons. I haven't been on campus. I don't know a lot of people, but I am trying, and I'm part of. So I go to NYU right now.
My alma mater.
We had a rally at NYU last year, and we had literal opposition from pro CCP students at NYU. So we were standing on one side, and we had them on the other side. They were like cursing at us and like yelling, and just, it was insane, because Nathan Law was there, and he was giving a talk at NYU, a law school, and they were just like very, very angry. So I imagine that if the coronavirus clears up, I will also face some sort of opposition on campus, because it's just in the nature of a lot of people. Even now, like, a lot of people will message me on Instagram or Facebook and be like, you better not be doing this stuff on NYU's campus, because we will be against it. But I am lucky that I found a group of I would say mentors. They're upperclassmen at NYU right now, and they formed a advocacy group for Hong Kong over these past 2 years.
Cool.
And I'm a part of that right now, and we're trying to organize events and stuff for Hong Kong. So I'm really thankful to have people like them that are able to guide me in navigating NYU, and also navigating organizing events for schools and different universities to make sure that we can get the message out to our generation.
And this is a big problem in a lot of American universities, but, I went to NYU too, so I kind of know what it's like there. Lots of students from China. The school has a lot of relationships with China. There's NYU Shanghai. How do you feel the school has been supporting you in these efforts? I mean, I know it's hard since you can't hold events like you used to.
Yeah, I think so. I've heard from friends who have organized events at NYU that it is a little bit more difficult for them to get the permits to organize events that are pro Hong Kong or
Hmm.
anti CCP. So I mean that I would say the extent of the difficulty that they've gone through. I maybe when I have more of an opportunity to organize events or speak to NYU boards regarding any sort of pro Hong Kong things that I want to do with our advocacy group, maybe I'll be able to have some more personal experiences with that. But right now, I think NYU has been quite silent, and my application last year was very centered around my work with Hong Kong because it's a really big part of my life. So I guess maybe after reading my application, they still felt that I would be a good addition to their campus. So you never know. Maybe some of the admissions officers there really resonate with the fight in Hong Kong. So I hope that's true, but I don't know how the board is trying to deal with this situation. I do know that a lot of money comes from China into NYU. That is something I do know, and I don't know if it's changed. But as of right now, that's something that I know that my friends have said is a very big difficulty when it comes to organizing events because of that kind of, monetary benefit that maybe a lot of pro CCP people are giving NYU.
I'll be very curious to hear how things go for you once sort of the lockdowns end and things get a little more back to normal. Because, yeah, NYU is a very interesting campus.
And my friend ran into some trouble with Columbia as well.
Oh, yeah,
So,
Columbia's.
so Columbia rejected completely. Like NYU allowed her. So the event that she was trying to do was a panel talking about panopticism when it comes to the censorship in China. And she tried to organize an event at Columbia, and they rejected it completely. They said like, we're going to make it as difficult as possible. We don't want to. I don't know why. I don't know if Columbia had their genuine reasons for it, but NYU allowed them to hold the event after a lot of struggle, but Columbia just didn't want them to hold the event there. And it could be any number of reasons, but it comes down to like one big reason I would say, and it's just like our stance is very, very uh, radical for them. I want to argue. I have no idea what the reason was.
I mean,
Yeah.
Columbia University has a very strong Chinese Students and Scholars Association, and
Yeah.
typically these organizations are connected to, in one way or another, the Chinese consulate. And, in some schools they're stronger and some they're not as strong, but Columbia happens to have a pretty, there was a time actually when Chinese consulate members were on the board of the Columbia University Chinese Students and Scholars Association. That may no longer be the case, but at any rate, they've also, I've heard from people, they've stopped events on campus about different human rights things, organ harvesting in China issues and so on. And so it's no surprise that there's opposition on these campuses because there's actually organizations on, whether it's Columbia or NYU or most major universities, there are organizations that are specifically there to sort of gather, mostly mainland Chinese students. And because of that strong, I guess, influence from the Chinese consulate in one way or another, they can actually form a very powerful opposition group to free speech. So there's your panopticon right there. They're always watching you.
But on the bright side, that kind of opposition gives you something to leverage and get more exposure.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because we always joke a lot of the times about how their opposition is the only thing that's really giving us so much media attention. Because whenever there's opposition, there's always a news crew that comes and it's like, oh, we want to understand both sides of the story. And then obviously, we're a little more, I would say we're more logical. So people like watching what we have to say. But I do appreciate the fact that a lot of people, the difference between China and America is literally the fact that we can speak freely about whatever we want. And so I appreciate their criticism and I try to understand their sides of the story. It strengthens my arguments as well, whenever I'm trying to argue against them. And it gives me something to talk about whenever I go on interviews like this and whenever I have the opportunity to talk to people regarding Hong Kong.
Have you ever had a situation where you've changed somebody's mind?
No.
No.
I think there's a spectrum, right? There's people that are very pro Hong Kong, and there are people that are in the middle that have no idea what's happening, and then there are people that are just, I love China, that's it. And I think I've been able to change the minds of people who are sitting in the middle. They might see like the violence and they're like, okay, I'm a little bit more on the side of the CCP right now. But then, you tell them a little bit more information and you educate them, and then they start to understand the struggle. They start to understand why you're doing this and why it's come to violence. And so they start to move on to our side. But if I'm talking about people who are very anti Hong Kong, pro CCP, yeah, never able to change their minds. And honestly, I would rather not. I want to say waste my time with that, because they have their opinions, I have mine, and when you're so hell bent against one thing, it's really difficult to really change your perspective.
Well, how about you? Why don't you change your perspective and become pro CCP, huh?
I mean, that's a good point. They've done a lot of good stuff, so maybe I'll look into that and see if I want to change my mind.
I mean, look at all the skyscrapers in China and all the high-speed rails they stole technology from Japan for. I mean, like, just a amazing country.
And, like, the low number of COVID cases is really incredible. I might just move there, because I don't want to deal with COVID anymore. They have 0 infections right now.
Yeah, those new anal swab tests are really leading the way. So have you, I know earlier you were talking about reaching out to other persecuted groups in China. Have you been able to do that on campus at all?
On camp? No.
No.
It's difficult. Obviously, everything comes down to COVID-19, but
Yeah.
there aren't a lot of people who are very outspoken on campus right now. I'm also a part of Amnesty International at NYU, and Amnesty International, I've seen, has really been focusing. We have like these discussion groups where we talk about, what events do we want to plan once this is all over, or what events can we plan right now online. And most of the events that we've even considered planning are either like anti-CCP, or like, let's raise money for the Uyghurs. Let's try to stop fast fashion brands that are using labor from China, like the Chinese concentration camp, that kind of idea. So I think that's pretty interesting. I haven't been able to, directly talk to all of these people, but what I have seen is that a lot of them do show opposition towards all of the human rights violations of the CCP. So I think that's the extent of, these different, I don't know where they're from. I don't know what their ethnic backgrounds are, but I do assume that a lot of them might be from Tibet, or might be from Taiwan, or Southern Mongolia even.
Yeah. Well, I know you're also part of the Captive Nations Coalition, which is working with the U.S. government to try and bring these different groups together.
Yes.
Well, what has that process been like?
Oh, the Captive Nations. Well, I have to thank Si-Hoon Kim if he's watching. But
Of course he's watching. He's a good fan.
The Captive Nations Coalition was it's his child. It's really where he brought all of us together from different ethnic backgrounds, and all of these people are being oppressed by China. And he wanted to make a platform where we could all speak together as one. And the same idea that I was talking about before with Project Black Mask, where we can have more people to come together and it makes us stronger together. And so our group is really comprised of a lot of very inspirational people with so many stories. And I would argue that I'm probably the one person that doesn't have like a super, super crazy story when it comes to China. And, I look up to every single person there, being the youngest one. And what we do is we go to DC. We've been to DC like a few times, and we've talked to Congress people. We've talked to senators and even Pompeo most recently. And we discuss with them what's happening and why the United States needs to help. And so what we're trying to push right now is a TCO, a transcontinental criminal organization designation for China. And really what it does is it's like a sanction for China, like just the overall sanction. And I think that it's a pretty interesting idea, but it's difficult to get something so huge to be passed. But we do hope that through our work, and, no matter how long it takes, I think that it's something that's worth fighting for, absolutely. And that the Captive Nations Coalition will continue sharing its stories, and will continue telling people that the stories of these oppressed people are not for you to just read and then forget, but it's for you to read and then take action on.
Well, I think that's what's so interesting about Project Black Mask, is that it gives an opportunity to, it's not just stories you like read about, like video images has a huge impact on people. People always ask me like, oh, what can I do? What can I do?
Yeah.
And this is like a really good thing they can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for people watching, like what would you tell them? How would they set up a video? How would they what kind of videos are you looking for?
Yeah, I mean right now, so I'm trying to create a lot more videos, obviously. But all you have to do is send a video of your words of support for either Hong Kongers or Uyghurs or Tibetans or whoever you want to. I'm going to try to expand my horizons and turn it into a very global kind of thing for opposition against China. And so what you have to do is just send your video to hkblackmask@gmail.com. Or if you just want to follow us and try to understand what we're doing, you can go on Facebook. It's just Project Black Mask HK, and you'll be able to find us and follow our journey and see what we're doing. And we're going to be launching a website very soon as well, so that'll be great.
Not to be confused with Project Black Mask, the face mask Facebook page.
Yep, that happened once, and right. I really do feel bad, but like, I mean, I think I really like the name Project Black Mask, so I'm not changing it anytime soon.
No, it's a great name. So the videos just that people do, that would just be like, my name is so and so, and I'm an NBA All-Star, and I stand with Hong Kong.
Yeah, you don't even have to put your name. A lot of people cover their faces too.
Okay. Because you could wear a black mask, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we actually have a YouTube channel as well. If you just search up like Project Black Mask HK. Right now, I'm keeping the HK because I haven't really created the whole, I haven't really been able to put the idea of like the Uyghurs or the Tibetans into like fruition, but we're trying right now, and then I'll take away the HK. But right now it's Project Black Mask HK on Facebook, YouTube. We don't have as many followers as China Uncensored, but I'm hoping to get there.
That's what we call a plug.
Yeah, that's the only reason I'm here. So
self-interest.
Yeah, but yeah, like I really hope that a lot of people will follow us and see, even if we don't get followers, I understand that a lot of people do see our videos and go on our Facebook, because it's also dangerous to actually follow an anti-CCP organization or group right now, which is insane to me. Project Black Mask is my child. So I do hope that it creates a lot of inspiration for people and shows teenagers or even people younger than me that we can make a difference and that our voices do matter.
Yeah, well, I think anyone following China Uncensored or China Unscripted will not have a problem following Project Black Mask.
Thank you.
But yeah, it's also such a great way to, like, as you say, show representatives in the government and have them, because they're not gonna like read a bunch of stuff, but like a bunch of videos of like all kinds of people talking about that China is important to them, that might actually get them to do something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any sense how the new Biden administration is handling all of these things?
Obviously, there's the rumors that the Biden administration, is very pro-China and doesn't care about Hong Kong at all. And obviously, right now we haven't seen any action of that sort, but I do expect that the Biden administration will not be as hard on the CCP as the Trump administration was. And honestly, we have to thank Trump's administration for doing a lot for not just the Hong Kong movement, but all of us that are in opposition against China. It's been really important for us to have an administration, even for 4 years, that was able to show the world. I think that he was able to change a lot of Americans' minds and show them how dangerous the CCP truly is. And that means a lot to us, definitely. But I hope that the Biden administration will be able to do the same thing, maybe even if it's to a lesser extent. I expect that, where there are human rights violations, that's where the United States should intervene and say, we disagree with what you're doing. But I do know that Anthony Blinken, the new Secretary of State, has met with prior Secretary Pompeo and has discussed with him how to handle the situation. Secretary Blinken has expressed that he is very anti those human rights violations, and he will take a stance against China if needed. So hopefully he'll keep on those words and fight for Hong Kong and fight for all of these different places as well.
Yeah. I definitely think there is reason to be hopeful for that. And again, something like Project Black Mask is a great way for the American people to tell the Biden administration, China is something we care about. Don't trust the CCP.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very difficult, going from an administration that was so strong and going to something that, it scared a lot of Hong Kongers. Obviously, a lot of Hong Kongers are pro-Trump for good reason. Trump has passed a lot of acts that have been very beneficial for Hong Kong, or at least have shown the world that the U.S. will stand on the right side of history. But even, Secretary Pompeo was an incredible ally of not just Hong Kongers, but the Uyghurs and Tibetans. And, it's going to be very difficult going to having such a serious stance in the mind of the Secretary of State to maybe not having such an important place. But I think that we have to fight for it. There's nothing that comes free. And so we will continue lobbying. We will continue showing our government that we need representation, and that we will continue trying to pass new acts that will protect our people, and that it will get up to Biden's desk one day, and that he will have to sign for in a positive light for us, because what we're fighting for is the right thing, and the American people stand behind us.
Well, I amen to that, and I hope someday soon you guys can meet with Secretary of State Blinken,
Hopefully.
and then maybe you can make a connection for us so we can get him on the show.
Definitely try. You might have to talk to Safe about that.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This was really, I found it very encouraging. Like it's a great way people can help.
Yeah. So please, if anybody has any questions, just contact me. I am so open to talking to people about anything, and trying to spend my time to educate people on what's happening in Hong Kong.
And what would be the best way for people to contact you? Go to the Black Mask.
Yeah, you can either go to Facebook or YouTube, or even my Instagram is Joyce, JoyceMho. And a lot of people have talked to me there, and that's really cool. And you can see that's my journey. My Instagram is where I first posted my initial support for Hong Kong, and it's where I post everything that I do. Every single rally or event that I've organized has been on my Instagram. So don't have to follow me if you want to check it out. We have some cool photos.
Cool. I'll put a link to all of those things below. And yeah, this has been great. Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
Well, I think what Joyce is doing is incredibly exciting.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's amazing. That's way better than the things I was doing at 18.
I'm glad you didn't share with us what you were doing when you were 18.
No, I mean, those are sealed records anyway.
Didn't you have purple hair?
What? What are you talking about?
Or green?
I have no comment on this.
Okay. Well, that's a rabbit hole.
Rabbit hole I'm not going to go down in this episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, I deny everything.
Yes. Well, thank you for watching this day. Shelley sends her regards. And really, be sure to add your voice to Project Black Mask. I think Joyce will really appreciate that, and so will the people of Hong Kong. It's really a great way to actually get the message out there, I think.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for watching. I'm Chris Chappell.
And I'm Matt Gnezda.
And we'll see you next time.